Welcome to Philippine True Crime Radio, where we uncover the darkest and most chilling true crime cases from the Philippines. Today, we take you deep into a case that shook Cebu City, the cardboard box murder, the death of Ria Mae Tocmo. A young woman, full of dreams, mysteriously vanishes, only to be found days later, bruised, bound, and lifeless, stuffed inside a discarded box on a busy roadside. Who was Ria Mae Tocmo? Who wanted her dead? And was the man who confessed to her murder really the one responsible, or just a fall guy in a far more sinister plot? Tonight, we unravel the truth. This is Philippine True Crime Radio. Cebu City was already alive with the usual Monday morning chaos. Motorcycles weaving through traffic, vendors setting up their stalls, and office workers rushing to beat the morning clock. The air was thick with the scent of car exhaust and frying street food, the city pulsing with life as it always did. But amidst the routine hustle, something was off, something unnatural. On a quiet roadside in Barangay Tisa, a large, discarded cardboard box lay abandoned near the curb. At first glance, it blended into the urban clutter. Just another piece of refuse, perhaps fallen off a delivery truck, like so many others. But as the hours ticked by, the box became impossible to ignore. A security guard from a nearby gated subdivision was the first to take notice. He saw it early that morning but dismissed it as unimportant. Others, too, walked past it, barely sparing a second glance, until a putrid stench began to fill the air. A smell so thick, so unmistakably wrong, that it sent an eerie chill through those who got too close. By afternoon, the box remained untouched, its presence an unspoken warning to the superstitious few who sensed something sinister about it. It wasn't until a street sweeper, doing his daily rounds, decided to move it out of the way that the horror inside was revealed. The moment he grabbed the edges, a sickening weight pulled against his grip. The box wasn't just heavy, it was unnaturally dense, as if something solid, something lifeless was packed. Inside, he hesitated. Flies swarmed in a restless dance above the folds of cardboard, their presence an ominous clue. The sweeper called over 2 barangay tanids, the village guards, for help. Together, they knelt beside the box, prying at the damp, sagging cardboard. The top flap, barely held together, suddenly gave way, and an arm fell out. A human arm, pale, lifeless, stiff. The men staggered backward, gasping in shock. One of the tanids dropped his flashlight, its beam landing on the inside of the box. That's when they saw her. A woman's body was crammed inside, bound and lifeless. She had been wrapped in a white blanket, but it had done little to hide the horror within. Her arms and legs were tied, the restraints biting deep into her flesh. Her once lively features were now a blur of bruises, wounds, and something far worse. Her face was barely recognizable, seemingly smashed and burned beyond recognition. For a moment there was silence. Then the street sweeper screamed. The barangay guards stumbled back, covering their noses against the overwhelming stench of decay. Their hands shook as they fumbled for their radios, calling in the police. Within minutes, sirens cut through the humid afternoon air. The once busy street fell into a hush as uniformed officers arrived, securing the area, forcing back the growing crowd of horrified onlookers. The investigators knelt beside the body, their faces set in grim determination. They had seen their share of violence before, but something about this was different. Something about the way she had been disposed of like garbage, left out in the open for the world to find. Who was she? How did she get here? And most chilling of all, who did this to her? The hunt for answers had begun. The crime scene was swarming with investigators, their gloved hands carefully collecting evidence, their faces unreadable as they worked. But even as they documented every detail, one question loomed over them. Who was she? She had no ID, no wallet, nothing that could tell them her name. No missing persons reports matched her description, making her an anonymous victim, lost to the chaos of the city. Yet, there were clues, small, haunting details that hinted at the life she once had. Her hair, once dark, had been dyed a striking blonde, an attempt at reinvention, perhaps, or just a simple act of self-expression. She wore a black sweater, paired with black shorts, the kind of outfit that suggested she had been going somewhere, maybe meeting someone. Her nails were manicured, a careful touch of self-care. Whoever she was, she had taken time to present herself, to be noticed. Now she was unrecognizable. The Cebu police worked tirelessly, combing through missing persons reports, cross-referencing every young woman gone missing in the past month. The hours stretched into days. And then a breakthrough. A report filed just 2 days earlier caught their attention. A young woman named Ria Mae Tocmo had been reported missing. She was 19 years old, originally from Davao del Norte, and had recently been staying in Cebu. The similarities were chilling. Investigators wasted no time in contacting her family. They arrived, faces pale, hands trembling, as they were led into the morgue. No one should have to identify a loved one this way, but this was their new, horrifying reality. A single glance at the clothes was all it took. Her sister gasped, covering her mouth as tears spilled down her face. "That's her," she whispered. "That's Ria." Then came the final confirmation, a delicate bracelet around the victim's bruised wrist. It had been a gift, something Ria always wore, something that never left her. Her family's worst nightmare had come true. Grief-stricken, they demanded answers. Who would do this to her? Why? The police had their first real lead, but it only led to more questions. Had she been the victim of a random attack, caught in the wrong place at the wrong time? Or had someone closer to her, someone she trusted, betrayed her in the most horrific way? Long before her name made headlines, long before she became a victim, Ria Mae Tocmo was just a young woman chasing dreams. She was born and raised in Davao del Norte, a small-town girl with big ambitions. Soft-spoken, kind, and deeply family-oriented. She was the youngest in her family, doted on by her 2 older sisters and her father, Romeo Tocmo. Despite growing up in a broken family, Ria never let hardship dim her spirit. She was described as obedient, someone who never got into trouble, someone who always tried to do the right thing. She had dreams, too, ones that revolved around helping her family, making a better life for herself, and proving that she could stand on her own. But somewhere along the way, those dreams led her to Cebu. At first, Ria had been on a path many parents would be proud of. She was a criminology student, with ambitions of becoming a police officer one day. But as time went on, her plans shifted. She began considering a career in tourism, and then, without much explanation, she left school altogether. Her eldest sister, Roki, had her doubts, but Ria was determined. She promised her family she would be okay, that she would find a job and help support them. What she didn't tell them was that she had no intention of staying in Davao. Instead, she secretly boarded a flight to Cebu, a decision that would ultimately lead her down an unknown, and possibly dangerous, path. When her family learned she was in Cebu, they were shocked. Why hadn't she told them? Somewhere in the heart of the city, Ria had built a life no one in her family fully understood. She had moved into a boarding house, staying with a friend named Jewel Smith, and had found work at a bar and restaurant. But what exactly had she been doing there? Had she fallen into something she couldn't escape from? Or worse, had she been lured into a situation that led to her death? Despite the secrecy, one thing was clear. Ria wanted to come home. Just days before her murder, she reached out to her sister one last time. She asked Roki to book her a ticket back to Davao, saying she wanted to attend a friend's christening on July 21st. But whether that was the real reason, or simply an excuse to leave Cebu for good, no one would ever know. Because Ria never made it home. Her request for a ticket would be the last message her family would ever receive from her. And just days later, she would be found, tied up, bruised, and lifeless inside a cardboard box. Now, the only thing left to uncover was why. Who had taken her life? And what terrible secrets had followed her to Cebu? The answers were waiting, hidden in the shadows of the city. And the search for justice was only beginning. The case of Ria Mae Tocmo was slipping through the cracks. Days had passed since her body was discovered, bound, bruised, lifeless, and abandoned in a cardboard box. Yet, there were no witnesses. No one had seen what had happened to her. No one had heard her cries, if she had been given a chance to scream at all. The city of Cebu had moved on, its streets still teeming with life, oblivious to the horrifying truth that had unfolded in its shadows. But then a breakthrough. A silent witness emerged. Not a person, but a camera. Investigators combed through hours of surveillance footage, hoping for anything. A face, a license plate, a direction. And then they found it. A single camera, mounted on a dull, rusting pole outside a small shop in Barangay Look, Mando City, had captured the last fleeting moments of Ria Mae Tocmo before she disappeared forever. The footage was grainy, the kind of black and white recording that made everything seem detached from reality, like watching a ghostly echo of the past. But there she was, Ria Mae Tocmo. The timestamp flickered in the lower corner of the screen. July 16, 2023. Early morning. The streets were still quiet, the world barely waking. A few figures lingered in the distance, their movements blurred and sluggish, caught in the monotony of their morning routines. Then the camera caught her. Ria stepped out of her boarding house. She was dressed in a black sweater and black shorts. A simple outfit, but the way she carried herself was deliberate. There was no panic in her steps, no hesitation. She moved as if she knew exactly where she was going, as if she were meeting someone. And then, from just outside the frame, a yellow motorcycle rolled into view. Its engine hummed softly, barely noticeable against the stillness of the morning. A man sat at the front, wearing an orange shirt. His face was hidden beneath the visor of a helmet, his posture relaxed, his hands steady on the handlebars. And Ria? She didn't hesitate. She walked straight toward the motorcycle, lifted herself onto the seat, and wrapped her arms loosely around the driver's waist. There was no pause, no second thought, no fear in her body language. Whatever was happening, it seemed, to her, perfectly normal. And then, they were gone. The motorcycle eased into the flow of the waking city, vanishing down the narrow streets. And just like that, Ria Mae Tocmo was never seen alive again. The footage sent a shockwave through the investigation. This wasn't just another random surveillance clip. This was the last documented proof of Ria's existence before she was found lifeless, discarded like trash. And more importantly, it revealed the key to everything. The yellow motorcycle, distinctive, the orange shirt, unusual, the direction they traveled, a trail waiting to be followed. Who was the man on the motorcycle? Was he the last person to see her alive? Or was he the one who took her life? The police studied the footage frame by frame, hoping for a clearer look at the driver's face. But the helmet shielded him too well. So they turned to the other details. The motorcycle, the clothing, the route. Somewhere in Cebu, this man in an orange shirt was walking among them. Did he know they were looking for him? Did he watch the news as headlines about Ria's death flashed across screens? Did he see her name trending online? Her photos plastered across social media? People demanding answers? Did he feel the weight of what he had done, if he had done it at all? The walls were closing in, and when the police finally found him, the case would explode into a shocking revelation. The investigation into Ria Mae Tocmo's murder had stalled. The police had one crucial piece of evidence: CCTV footage of her getting onto a yellow motorcycle, driven by a man in an orange shirt. But that was it. No one had seen where they went. No one could say what happened after she disappeared into the streets of Cebu City that morning. Her body had been found bound, beaten, and stuffed into a cardboard box. But beyond that, there were no answers. Then, on a day like any other, her phone resurfaced. And with it, the first real break in the case. It was July 27, 2023, 10 days after Ria's murder. The Labangan police station was buzzing with the usual activity. Officers typing out reports, the steady hum of conversations filling the air. Then, a man walked in, holding a smartphone in his hand. No one paid much attention. That is, until he spoke. "I think this belonged to the girl in the cardboard box." The room went still. Every officer within earshot turned to look at him. One of them, his face tightening, stood up and gestured for the man to sit. "What do you mean?" the officer asked, voice measured but tense. The man placed the phone gently on the desk between them. "I bought it," he said, "near Carbon Market." The officer picked it up, turning it over in his hands. It looked ordinary, just another phone. But to the police, it was everything. Ria Mae Tocmo's phone had been missing from the moment her body was found. Investigators had assumed it was either destroyed, sold, or taken by her killer. But now, here it was, and the man holding it had a story to tell. The man explained that he had bought the phone for 1,700 pesos from someone near Carbon Market, one of Cebu's busiest districts, packed with street vendors, buyers, and people looking for quick, no questions asked deals. At first, it had seemed like just another second-hand sale, until he turned it on, and the screen lit up. The first thing he saw were the photos. Images of a young woman smiling, posing for selfies, captured in candid moments. Then realization sank in. The girl in the pictures. The girl from the news. The girl found inside the box. He felt his stomach drop. "I knew I had to bring it here," he said, his voice unsteady. And just like that, the investigation had its first real lead. The police wasted no time. If the phone had been sold at Carbon Market, there was a good chance the transaction had been caught on CCTV. They combed through surveillance footage from every shop, every alley, every angle they could find. And then, they saw him, the man who had sold Ria's phone, standing near a cluster of vendors, his posture casual, making the exchange as if it were just another business deal. And he was wearing an orange shirt, the same orange shirt seen in the CCTV footage of Ria's last known moments. The connection was undeniable. The man on the motorcycle, the man who last saw Ria alive, the man now selling her stolen phone. They were all the same person. With the surveillance footage in hand, the police launched a citywide search. It didn't take long. By July 29, 2023, the suspect was in custody. His name was Simeon Gabutero Jr., a 22-year-old construction worker, and now the prime suspect in the brutal murder of Ria Mae Tocmo. The police had him. The public wanted answers. Ria's family wanted justice. But when police sat him down in the interrogation room, Gabutero had a story of his own, a story that would twist the case in an entirely new direction. The hunt for Ria Mae Tocmo's killer had led the police to Simeon Gabutero Jr., the 22-year-old construction worker caught selling her stolen phone, with CCTV footage placing him at the crime scene It seemed like the case was finally about to crack wide open. But when officers placed him under arrest on July 29, 2023, Gabutaro didn't react with fear or anger. He was calm. Too calm. "I didn't do it," he told them. "I'm not a killer." At first, Gabutaro denied everything. He admitted to selling Ria's phone but insisted he wasn't the one who killed her. He claimed that a neighbor had given him the phone, telling him to sell it and keep quiet. The police weren't convinced. They pressed him hard. They laid out the evidence. He was the last person seen with Ria, driving the yellow motorcycle. He sold her phone days after her body was found. He had a history of criminal behavior, including robbery. Yet he held onto his story. He swore he had nothing to do with her murder. That is, until the pressure became too much. Hours into the interrogation, Gabutaro broke. "I killed her." The room went silent. His voice was flat, emotionless, as if he were discussing something far removed from himself. He leaned forward, eyes dark with exhaustion, and told the police his version of the truth. According to Gabutaro, he and Ria had been in a long-distance relationship for months. They had met on Facebook in December 2022, and over time he became obsessed with her. She was beautiful, young, and charming. Everything he wanted. But there was one problem. Gabutaro was convinced that Ria was lying to him. He had been sending her money, believing he was supporting the woman he loved. But when she finally came to Cebu, he felt like something was off. He claimed she had multiple Facebook accounts, talked to other men, and that he wasn't the only one sending her money. The night of July 16th, they finally met in person, inside his boarding house in Barangay Guadalupe. And that's when everything fell apart. Gabutaro said he confronted Ria about her other relationships. He demanded to know why she had played with his feelings, why she had taken his money if she never really cared. She laughed. That was the moment he snapped. In a fit of rage, he lunged at her, hands tightening around her throat. Ria tried to fight back, but he was stronger. He squeezed and squeezed until the struggling stopped, until she was still, until she was dead. For a moment he just stood there, staring at what he had done. Then panic set in. Gabutaro knew he had to get rid of the evidence. He wrapped her body in a white blanket, tied her with garters and shoelaces, and stuffed her inside a cardboard box. But there was one more chilling detail. He didn't do it alone. Someone helped him transport the body. A mystery accomplice. Yet, when the police asked who it was, Gabutaro refused to answer. He took the blame alone. The confession was on record. The police had their killer. But something still didn't feel right. Was this really the truth? Or was Gabutaro hiding something even darker? The interrogation room was suffocatingly still. A single fluorescent bulb flickered above, casting an eerie glow on the steel table where Simeon Gabutaro Jr. sat, his hands folded neatly in his lap. His face was expressionless, his eyes dark pools of nothingness, revealing no remorse, no emotion. Across from him, the officers waited. The only sound was the rhythmic tapping of a pen against the table, sharp, deliberate, almost like a clock counting down to the inevitable truth. Gabutaro had already confessed. He had admitted to killing Ria Mae Tocmo. But words weren't enough. The police needed details. And so, with the same cold, detached voice, he walked them through the night he took her life. According to Gabutaro, July 16, 2023, started like any other day. But for him, it was different. He was finally going to meet Ria Mae Tocmo in person, the woman he had fallen for online, the woman he claimed to have sent money to, the woman he believed owed him something. That morning, he rode to her boarding house in Cebu City, his yellow motorcycle weaving through the busy streets. He waited outside, calm, patient, the engine idling softly beneath him. The CCTV footage caught it all. Ria stepping out, walking toward him. No hesitation, no second thoughts. She climbed onto the back of the bike, wrapping her arms loosely around his waist. She had no idea this would be the last ride of her life. The city blurred past them as they made their way to Barangay Guadalupe, Cebu City, where Gabutero's cramped, windowless boarding house awaited. Inside, the air was thick, stale, the kind of place that felt like it had trapped more secrets than it let escape. The walls were bare, the floor scuffed, the bed unmade. And the moment Ria stepped inside, the atmosphere changed. The air shifted, heavy with something unspoken, dangerous. Gabutero locked the door, and then the confrontation began. "Why did you do this to me?" he demanded. His voice was tight, trembling with frustration. Ria blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" He accused her of using him, playing with his emotions, laughing behind his back. He had sent her money. He had believed they were something real. But now he felt like a fool. Ria denied it. "That's not true," she said. And then he claimed. She laughed. And that was the trigger. The rage inside him erupted like a dam breaking open. His vision blurred. Everything went red. Gabutero lunged at her, his hands wrapped around her throat, his fingers digging into her skin, pressing down harder and harder. Ria's eyes widened in horror, her hands flailing, clawing, scratching. She fought hard. Her nails tore at his arms, at his neck, leaving tiny red crescents of defiance. She tried to scream, but the sound was trapped beneath his grip. Her body twisted, thrashed, a desperate attempt to break free. But he was too strong, and she was losing strength. Her legs kicked weakly against the floor. Her fingers trembled, then fell limp. The struggle faded until there was nothing left. Gabutero kept squeezing, even after she had stopped moving. He needed to be sure. By the time he finally let go, the room was silent. Only his own ragged breathing filled the air. And Ria Mae Tocmo was dead. Gabutero stood over her lifeless body, his chest heaving, sweat dripping from his forehead. The reality of what he had just done slammed into him like a crashing wave. He had to get rid of her. He grabbed a white blanket, wrapping it tightly around her body, her arms folded awkwardly against her sides. Then he found garters and shoelaces and tied her limbs together. Tighter, tighter. The restraints bit into her lifeless skin. But there was one problem. She was too heavy for him to move alone. He needed help. When the police asked him how he moved the box, Gabutero hesitated. His fingers twitched. His eyes shifted to the floor. He had a motorcycle, but carrying a lifeless body, bound and hidden in a cardboard box, alone was impossible. "Who helped you?" the officers asked. Gabutero shook his head. "No one. A lie. They knew it. He knew it. But without a name, without evidence, the mystery accomplice remained unknown. But forensics didn't need his confession, because the truth was already written on Ria's body. When investigators examined her hands, they found something chilling. Beneath her fingernails, tiny traces of skin, of blood, of one final act of resistance. She had fought back. She had tried to leave a mark, a final desperate message from beyond the grave. DNA tests confirmed the match. The skin beneath her nails belonged to Simeon Gabutero. It was irrefutable proof. He was her killer. But what about the person who helped him? Who else knew the truth? And most importantly, was Gabutero hiding something even bigger? The police weren't convinced this was the full story. And soon, new suspicions would emerge. Ones that would turn this case upside down. The case against Simeon Gabutero Jr. seemed airtight. CCTV footage placed him with Ria on the day she disappeared. Her phone was found in his possession. DNA under her fingernails confirmed she had fought him in her final moments. Everything pointed to one man. On paper, it was an open-and-shut case. But outside the police station, beyond the cold walls of forensic evidence and signed confessions, a storm was brewing. Doubts, accusations, theories, and soon the case would spiral into chaos. From the very beginning, Ria's family refused to believe the official story. Something felt wrong. Something was missing. They combed through their memories, their conversations, their messages with Ria, but there was nothing. Not a single mention of Simeon Gabutero. Not one text. Not one call. Not even a passing comment about a boyfriend. How could she have been in a long-distance relationship with a man she never spoke about? Her father, Romeo Tocmo, was firm in his disbelief. "We cannot accept their investigation," he told reporters, his voice cracking under the weight of grief. "Instead of giving us justice, they've only added to our pain." They demanded a parallel investigation. They wanted to know the truth, because they were certain the story the police were telling, it wasn't the whole story, and they weren't the only ones who thought so. As soon as the news of Gabutero's confession broke, the internet exploded. True crime forums, Facebook groups, Twitter threads, theories spread like wildfire. People weren't satisfied with the explanation that this was just a crime of passion. They wanted more. They wanted a bigger conspiracy. And then, Bianca Lee entered the picture. A woman claiming to have insider knowledge took to Facebook and a local radio show to make a shocking accusation. She pointed the finger at Jewel Smith, Ria's own friend. "She knows more than she's saying," Bianca claimed. She was involved. The accusation set the internet on fire. People latched onto it, twisting it, fueling the flames. Jewel's photos and personal details were ripped from her social media pages, circulated, dissected, and weaponized. She was jealous of Ria. She helped Gabutero kill her. She's hiding something. The attacks weren't just theoretical. They were personal. Hate messages, death threats, people demanding her arrest. Until finally, Jewel broke her silence. On August 7, 2023, Jewel Smith walked into the Cebu City police station. Her face was pale, her hands trembling, her eyes sunken from sleepless nights. She sat across from the officers, her voice barely above a whisper. "I had nothing to do with this." She begged them to clear her name, to stop the harassment, the rumors, the accusations. She told them where she had been on July 17th, the day Ria's body was found. She was in her boarding house all day. She had witnesses. Neighbors confirmed her story. Her alibi was airtight, but it didn't matter, because the internet had already sentenced her. And once the public turned against you, there was no escape. And Jewel wasn't the only one caught in the crossfire. Just as the theories reached their peak, another unexpected witness came forward. A taxi driver called into a local radio station. He had a story to tell. According to him, on July 17th, he had picked up a woman carrying a large, empty box. She was petite, had tattoos, and was accompanied by a foreign-looking man. Their destination? A condominium in Barangay Labangan, the same area where Ria's body was dumped. The implications were chilling. Was this the same box that Ria had been stuffed into? Had someone else set up Gabutero to take the fall? Or was this just another false lead? Another piece of the puzzle that didn't fit? The police investigated his claims, but there was one major problem. His timeline didn't match up. By the time the taxi driver claimed to have seen the box, Ria's body had already been discovered. Had he mistaken the date? Or was he just another voice lost in the noise of speculation? With the case spiraling out of control, the police were forced to step in. Major Angelito Valisar called for an emergency press briefing. His voice was stern, commanding. Justice can only be served through the correct legal processes, not through the court of public opinion. He laid out the facts. Jewel Smith had an alibi. The taxi driver's timeline didn't add up. Gabutero had confessed, and DNA evidence backed it up. But despite their reassurances, doubts remained. People still believed that Gabutero was just a fall guy, that someone else was pulling the strings, that the real killer or killers were still out there. And as the trial loomed closer, one question refused to fade. Was this really just a crime of passion? Or was Ria Mae Tocmo's murder part of something far more sinister? For weeks, the case of Ria Mae Tocmo had consumed the public. The gruesome discovery, the shocking confession, the swirling conspiracies. It played out like a true crime thriller, captivating the nation, leaving people hungry for answers and desperate for justice. But as the investigation neared its final chapter, a nagging sense of unease lingered, because despite everything, not everyone was convinced that justice had truly been served. As investigators pieced together the final moments of Ria's life, an unexpected witness came forward. A boy, Simeon Gabutero's 15-year-old younger brother. At first, he stayed silent, too scared, too confused, too paralyzed by the weight of what he knew. But as the pressure mounted, as detectives pressed him, as his conscience gnawed away at him, he cracked. And when he finally spoke, his words sent a chill down everyone's spine. July 16, 2023. Nightfall. The boy had been at home when his older brother approached him. "I need your help," Simeon had said. He pointed to a box already taped shut. "Heavy, bulky. Help me carry this." "What's inside?" the younger brother had asked. Simeon paused. "Clothes." The boy didn't question it, didn't think twice, didn't realize that with each step he took, he was helping his brother cover up a murder. Together, they lifted the box, its unusual weight pressing against their arms, struggled to place it onto a waiting motorcycle. The younger brother didn't know that inside, folded in on herself, was Ria Mae Tocmo's lifeless body. Didn't know that her cold skin, her battered frame, her silent screams were hidden beneath the cardboard and tape. Didn't know that this wasn't just an errand. It was a crime scene in motion. And by the time he realized the truth, it was too late. The weight of that realization crushed him. He had unknowingly helped his brother dispose of a body. And now he would face the consequences of his own actions. Despite the whispers of conspiracy circulating online, the police stood by their case. They had heard the theories, that there was a bigger plot, that there was someone else involved, that Simeon Gabutero was nothing more than a fall guy. But when they laid out the facts, the truth became undeniable. CCTV footage confirmed Gabutero was the last person seen with Ria. DNA tests proved Ria had fought back, leaving his skin under her fingernails. His younger brother's testimony confirmed that Gabutero disposed of the body himself. No shadowy masterminds, no high-level conspiracies, no hidden puppeteers pulling the strings. It was him, Simeon Gabutero Jr., the man who had claimed to love Ria Mae Tocmo, the man who had taken her life. September 1st, 2023. Inside the detention cell, the air was thick with the stench of sweat and regret. Gabutero sat motionless, his back pressed against the cold wall, his face unreadable. A guard stepped forward. "Did you kill Ria Mae Tocmo?" For the first time, there was no hesitation. "Yes." His voice was flat, hollow, emotionless. "I killed Ria Mae. No one forced me to confess. No tears, no remorse, just cold, brutal acceptance." His words sent a chill through the courtroom. But even then, even as the case seemed closed, not everyone was convinced. Despite his confession, despite the mountains of evidence, Ria Mae's family refused to believe it was that simple. Something still didn't feel right. Why had Ria never mentioned Gabutero before? Where were the supposed money transfers he claimed to have sent her? Who was the mystery accomplice who helped move the box? The police had their suspect. The court had its confession. But the family still had doubts. "We cannot accept their investigation," her father said. "Instead of giving us justice, they've only added to our pain." Even as the justice system moved forward, even as Gabutero sat behind bars, they demanded a deeper investigation. Because to them, this wasn't over. To them, the real truth had yet to be uncovered. As the case came to a close, the city of Cebu tried to move on. But one final question refused to fade. Did the police get the right man? Or was the real killer still out there, watching as the world moved on without Ria Mae Tocmo? The case of Ria Mae Tocmo was supposed to be closed. The killer had confessed. The evidence pointed in one direction. The trial was set. But even as Simeon Gabutero Jr. sat in his jail cell, awaiting trial for murder, and his 15-year-old brother faced charges for unknowingly helping dispose of the body, the story refused to fade. Because not everyone was convinced justice had been served. On August 18, 2023, Cebu authorities formally filed murder charges against Simeon Gabutero Jr. His younger brother, just a teenager, was also charged, despite being a minor, for his role in carrying the box that contained Ria's lifeless body. His involvement was ruled as unknowing, but the law was unforgiving. The prosecution was determined to secure a conviction. They built their case on Gabutero's own confession, the CCTV footage that placed him with Ria on the night of July 16th. Forensic evidence, Ria's DNA found under his fingernails, a silent testament to her final fight for life. For the police, this was airtight. For them, the case was closed. But the public? Not so much. Was this really just a crime of passion? Or was there something more? Something the police had overlooked? Theories continued to swirl in online forums, in hushed conversations, in the minds of those who refused to accept the simple version of events. Why did Ria's family insist she had never mentioned Gabutero before? Why did Gabutero refuse to name his accomplice? Was there someone else who had a reason to want Ria dead? There were too many unanswered questions. The taxi driver's suspicious statement about a woman carrying a box. The unfounded accusations against Jewel Smith. The rapid escalation of the case, from a missing person to a confession to a conviction in record time. It all felt too clean, too rushed. Had the police closed the case too quickly? Or were people simply unwilling to accept the truth? That Ria Mae Tocmo had died at the hands of a man who claimed to love her? Opinions were split. Some people believed the confession. To them, Gabutero was guilty. The DNA beneath Ria's fingernails. His own words admitting to the crime. The CCTV footage. Everything pointed to one man. A tragic case of obsession gone too far. A man who couldn't handle rejection, who had spent months sending money to a woman who never loved him back. A crime driven by rage, jealousy, and control. But others, they weren't convinced. They saw loopholes, missing pieces. They questioned whether the police had truly investigated all possible angles. Had they really found everyone involved? Or had the real mastermind gotten away? The case of Ria Mae Tocmo became more than just a murder investigation. It became a lesson in public perception, crime, and the role of justice in a world fueled by speculation. The case left deep scars on Ria's family, on the public, and on the justice system itself. It exposed the dangers of misinformation, How quickly the court of public opinion could turn suspects into villains and victims into conspiracies. It revealed the power of online accusations, of theories that could ruin lives before a single verdict was reached. But it also highlighted a dark reality, that sometimes, even when all the pieces seem to fit, doubt still lingers. Because in the end, true crime isn't always as simple as it seems. Final thought. Did the police get the right man? Or is the real killer still out there, watching, waiting, as the world moves on?